Why don't I get started? Today I'm going to be introducing myself, what got me into burnout prevention and recovery, keeping that a little brief because I think that's, I want to keep it super relevant to you. And then we're going to go through the burnout checklist, which I know some of you have already started to look over, to really gain an idea of how is burnout showing up for me? How is it impacting my life on a daily basis? Because you very well have probably, I'm sure, heard the term burnout. You might have even said to yourself, oh, I'm so burnt out. But what really is it and how is it showing up for you? And we'll be continuing to get into the what is it and the science of it tomorrow and the days forward. But for now, we're going to be learning, okay, what is going on? How is it affecting my mind and my body? And then ultimately impacting my life, my relationships, and all that kind of stuff. And so I just feel like sharing at this moment, it popped into my head, is if you've gone through the checklist, or when we do go through the checklist and it's maybe feeling a little bit panicky of, oh my God, I'm all of these things, or most of these things, recognizing that that's extremely common and that's why we're here, and that's why I do the work, because we live in a burnout culture that perpetuates and awards us for being busy and always on. And so that creates a lot of what these burnout symptoms are. And it kind of creates the idea that, oh, this is normal. This is just everyday life. This is how business gets done. And so the assessment, the self-assessment, is very much an awareness tool that gives you the idea of, oh, wait a minute, I don't have to live like this. I don't have to feel totally exhausted. I don't have to feel like I'm under a crushing amount of pressure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, you don't. So that's the really good news. And that's why if you notice that I put the emotion on the live of optimistic, because I love being able to share this information because it allows for a shift in being able to say, it's possible to live without this excess stress. So I haven't even introduced myself yet. My name is Charlene Rymsha. I founded a wellness business in 2018 called Everyday Coherence. Coherence being the clear communication between body and mind that allows you to feel and be more of who you are. And so stress very much cuts us off from who we are, especially ongoing stress. Yes, daily stress, but also the accumulated effects of stress, which ultimately becomes burnout. And so once we can really build that alliance, that friendship between body and mind, it allows for de-stressing to become possible. It allows for you to connect to more and more of who you are. And so I'll give you a bit of a background of what brought me there to focus on burnout prevention and recovery. And actually, I did not start out planning on focusing on burnout. When I built my business, I was actually focusing more on the after effect of what burnout is, which is that inner sense of self-knowledge, that inner sense of joy. And backing up on my healing experience, it was about 1995 or so that I stepped into my first yoga class out in Oregon, if anyone's familiar with the states. So Oregon is in the Northwest, and there were big windows, and we were doing yoga looking out onto the Pacific Ocean, and it was just absolutely quite magical. But I was also very much disconnected from my body, and I was experiencing a lot of depression and crushingly low self-esteem. I was like 19 years old or so. And without really realizing it, that was my first step into the work that I'm doing now, which is very much connecting mind and body. And so as I started to do more yoga, as I was introduced to more mindfulness, I also moved to California for a while and was skiing. So I would downhill ski and downhill mountain bike during the day, and then really like action, action, action. And then when I'd come home, I would do a much slower practice of yoga, mindfulness, meditation. So I was really learning how to balance, action, and rest, and really becoming mindful of my body's connection. And through that, once I really connected to my mind and my body, this effervescent feeling of joy started to bubble up. It was this energy that felt like truth. It felt more like me. It felt more like health and healing and wellness. And so even when things were chaotic outside of me, or even when there were times where my thoughts were really kind of trying to tell me that I'm, say, not worth it, or that I had negative self-talk, I was able to return to my body and feel that love and feel that joy. So basically, I realized through working with people and within Everyday Coherence that the biggest joy suck in life, right, what was keeping people from feeling this effervescent sense of well-being, was the chronic stress due to burnout. My clients were coming to me burnt out. And so that's actually how I ended up becoming specializing in burnout prevention and recovery. I really learned that from my clients. And then ultimately, it also led to writing this book, Burn Bright. I want to share a very mini story about this. As I started posting on social media, and particularly Instagram, writing about burnout prevention, the importance of mind-body connection, and an editor from a publishing company reached out to me. He slid into my DMs, so to speak, and asked me if I wanted to write a book about burnout. And I share that partially with you because I had like 220 followers or something like that at that time. So I didn't have a built-in audience that was definitely going to be buying the book. And so I wanted to share that with you because it's kind of like anything's possible, right? When we put our mind and our bodies and our hearts into it, that great things can really happen. And so this book has been such an amazing experience for me to write, but also for people to be able to really learn how to get out of the burnout culture. Even when we live in it, it's very much about learning how to connect to your mind and body in a new way where you become more resilient to the burnout culture. Ideally, the culture is changing. Ideally, systems are changing within corporations and with businesses and within organizations. But until then, we really need to take responsibility for our own mental health. And so with that said, I think I said basically everything that I wanted to say there. I was looking at my little notes there. So in a way, even though I'm a therapist, this in a way is teaching you how to become your own therapist, how to work with your thoughts, how to process your emotions, how to make decisions that come from the heart. And I'm not suggesting that having a therapist is a bad idea, but this book offers you a lot of guidance and tools to be able to do it and practice it for yourself, enhancing your relationship to yourself. I also work with couples, so enhancing relationships within a couple's dynamic. So awareness of how burnout shows up for you is such an important piece of it, which is why I wanted you to take the burnout self-assessment. And so burnout itself is, the short definition is the depletion of your internal resources due to ongoing and chronic stress. And that shows up differently for everyone. It's in 2019, the World Health Organization deemed it a workplace phenomena and called it a medical syndrome. So two things related to that. One is, yes, you can have work burnout, but you absolutely can have stress unrelated to work. So if you're going through a stressful situation as a caretaker of someone with a health issue, or or a mom, or going through a very difficult relationship or a divorce or whatever it is, it's really less about work particularly and more about what it is that is bringing on these stressors that are becoming so much that it's chronic. And then the other piece of that is that it's a syndrome, meaning that it's identified by a cluster of symptoms. And for each person, those cluster of symptoms are different. So your burnout, expression of burnout, can be very different than your coworkers or your husbands or your partners or whatever it is. And so really getting in touch with yourself and going, okay, how is burnout showing up for me? Is ultimately the first step to preventing it if you magically don't have it, which these days, especially with the pandemic, most people do. Some version of it, and it can be a spectrum between like low-grade burnout all the way up to absolute total exhaustion, bedridden, can't get out of bed type of a thing. And so let's go over the burnout assessment now. I know that most of you have looked over or downloaded the checklist, and so I'm going to look at it. It happens to be on page 10 of my book. And so if you will, I certainly, I can't see you in live workshops. I can see everyone engaged. I'm just trusting that you're engaged, and thank you for being engaged with this. So I'm going to read off each of these symptoms here. And as I do, just spend a few moments, maybe even closing your eyes and asking yourself, is this my experience right now? And doing your best not to judge it. I know it can be really challenging not to be like, yeah, I totally feel that, and feel even worse about yourself, right? Just right now recognizing and seeing it as just an opening, a chance to be able to, become aware that it's there, and use that as an empowerment tool towards healing. So first one, I'm totally exhausted most of the time. Just checking in with yourself. Maybe even putting your hand on your heart, lovingly asking yourself, almost like you were talking to your best friend, asking her these questions, hearing her answer. Of course, it's your answer, but just that kindness to yourself. Next one, I feel overwhelmed by my mounting to-do list and competing priorities. Number 3, I feel constantly busy, yet I feel like I'm achieving less than I should. Next one, I experience anxiety or low-grade panic much of the time. I struggle with work-life balance and have little personal time, even for friends and family. Yeah, and so with that one, sometimes it's like you want to just isolate. Like, I don't even have the bandwidth or desire to see my friends and family. Next one, I'm becoming increasingly irritable, annoyed, angry, and short-tempered. Next one, I'm under a crushing amount of pressure to succeed. I'm increasingly cynical or hypercritical towards myself and others. I have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And sometimes it can be a hard time getting up, or just feeling like at the end of the day you just pass out and you don't even wake up until the next day out of pure exhaustion. I find it hard to concentrate and stay on task. Next one. Life has become a bunch of tasks to get done, and I'm losing all sense of purpose, right? It's just like, let me just get through the day, let me check off the boxes, but then that leaves you feeling empty inside. I've been drinking or eating too much, or perhaps for some people eating too little. Not nourishing your body in the way that needs to be. I worry a lot about work, people, and then things that happened in the past, or projecting fears into the future. And then last one on this checklist is I suffer from digestion problems, tension headaches, and or chronic aches and pains. And so this is not an exhaustive list. I actually, when I first was writing the checklist, it was like 3 pages long, and one of my friends who's a business coach was like, no, we can't have a 3-page checklist. So just knowing that there may be other ways that burnout and the chronic stress shows up for you. So just a little bit of a debrief. I'd love to hear from anyone, either live now or on the recording, of as you went through the checklist, was there anything that surprised you? Was there anything that you learned about yourself from it? And or are there any symptoms that were not on the checklist that you'd like to kind of ask me and see if that may be a symptom of burnout?